we're walking out and we walk past the like lingerie section.
Yeah, it was like this lacy white wedding lingerie vibes.
And then it was that awkward thing where I was thinking, oh, maybe you should buy that for her. My name is Abby.
And my name is Liam, and you are listening to the Evolving Love podcast.
In this podcast, we deep dive into the topics of non-monogamy and relationships, drawing from our experiences of being consensually non-monogamous for over a decade.
Whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, curious, or anything in between, we invite you to join us for this conversation.
Let's begin.
Okay, fifth time's a charm. We have tried to start this podcast recording a few times and then figured out that in actual fact, you didn't have your headphones plugged in, so it felt super strange.
I feel a bit embarrassed. I don't know how I didn't pick up on that. I was just feeling quite disconnected and like I just couldn't hear you properly.
Yeah, well, you were just hearing me in the room and I had your voice straight into my ear holes.
Yeah, no wonder you're looking at me strangely and I'm like staring at you. At one point you were like, what's wrong? And I was thinking, no, I'm just watching you. And I think I didn't realize, but I was watching you because I just couldn't hear you well.
Yeah, well, it does make a difference. So now we are connected via headphones.
Really me, it's embarrassing.
So that makes all the difference. And we did want to talk today about our recent getaway to Sydney.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And a lot of fun things happened on the getaway, which we're going to get into. And we're also going to get into the reason why we went up to Sydney, which was for the Australian Podcast Awards.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought we'd start off by talking about a few very funny things that happened. Some funny things, some sexy things, some interesting things that all kind of related to us being non-monogamous and how maybe being non-monogamous and on a getaway kind of interacts with itself and allows us to kind of experience getaways in a slightly different way to what a monogamous couple might have had as their experience of a Sydney trip.
Well, first off, we love being on the road together. We love listening to podcasts, chatting.
We love a road trip.
We love a road trip. And we love stopping at beautiful Berkeley Books in Berrima.
Yeah, that is one of our favorite spots. It's like this cute little book barn that now has kind of become pretty fancy, but we've been going there forever.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
We love it. It's super beautiful. Secondhand books, new books, a beautiful restaurant, beautiful grounds. I think they have lots of beautiful weddings there. It's like just a lovely, lovely spot. So anyway, we went there for lunch on our way to Sydney and you just surprised me. You really took me off guard. So we're sitting there, we're looking at the menu. We're thinking, what are we going to have? We're going to like share a pizza or some salad, or we're going to have our own main meals, or what are we going to do? Anyway, we decide what we want,
right? Which
I think was like we were going to share an appetizer and then I was going to have a main meal. You were going to have a main meal.
Yes.
Whatever. We're just going to drink some sparkling water.
Yeah.
Anyway, the waitress comes along and she's like, are you ready to order? And I'm like, yes, thank you. We're going to have this appetizer. I'll have this for my main and we're going to have some sparkling water.
Yes.
And then sort of gestured over to you.
Right.
To say what main you wanted.
Yes.
Which I thought was a completely normal thing to do.
So you ordered all of the kind of entrees, and for American listeners, an entree in Australia is like the first course.
Yes,
it's
so
like
the appetizer.
Yeah. So you ordered the appetizers for us, and then you ordered the main course for yourself, and then gestured over to me and said, oh, what would you like? And I said, I'll have the, whatever I had, the burger or something. For some reason, it kind of got to me.
You didn't like it. You immediately looked at me and you said, I don't like the way that you just ordered for the table.
Yeah, right.
And I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, what? What do you mean? Who are you, Mr. Feminist? Like, what does it matter? I didn't order for you. I wasn't like, and the man will have the steak with the something or other. It's like,
right.
I just ordered what we were sharing.
Yeah, yeah. I think for some reason it kind of tapped into some like affront to my masculinity or something like in that moment. And it's funny because so to kind of color in the backstory, you have worked in hospitality before. So you feel very comfortable in like hospitality situations. So even when we're going out for dinner with friends or family, often you will be like the captain of the ordering. Like you will appoint yourself as like, everyone tell me and I'm just going to like pound it out because I know that nothing is worse than being at a restaurant and just kind of like dithering through like an order to a waiter or a waitress.
I know what the waiter wants.
Yeah, they just want clear, concise.
And I've got a good memory. So I can remember, if ever we go out for dinner with my parents and your mom or some other people or a group, I just remember everything.
Yeah, you do.
And in order.
I think because you jumped into it so fast and you were so decisive for some reason, and usually and often, I think most of the time you're the captain of the ordering when we go out.
Yeah, don't you like an assertive woman, Liam?
Well, yeah. Well, for some reason in that moment, it just took me off guard. And I was like, I wanted to be assertive in that situation. I was kind of like, yeah, and I don't know whether it was the context. Like we've gone to the same place a million times. I don't think I've ever made this point to you before. Have I?
No, I mean, I'm wondering, is this something that's been annoying you previously and it's like festering? And I'm also wondering if maybe you had some like resentment for me in that moment. Like, did I do something in the car that annoyed you? Did I say something? Was I on your nerves? And then like, it was one of those situations where it's like, oh, anything she does is just annoying me now. And now she's ordering for me too. Was it like that?
See, from my recollection, I was pretty happy. I think the car ride was good. We're having a good time. So I don't know if it was any lingering kind of resentment about other things. And then this was just the straw that broke the camel's proverbial.
Yeah, I wonder if it was to do with the other tables around us.
I think everyone there and Berkeley Books, like it's in the southern highlands of Australia. So it's like this beautiful kind of scenic kind of, a lot of people retire there from Sydney, I think. They make all their money and then, so I think it would be safe to say that we were bringing down the average age of the people at this restaurant by about 40 years.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was like I was surrounded by hyper masculine, geriatric men.
Well, I'm just like, was it the collective consciousness of everyone else who was there? Who who were perhaps ordering for their wives of 50 years, and all of a sudden
that's a great read.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you're sort of slipping into that. Maybe it's that. Do you know what it reminded me of?
What?
When we were planning our wedding, you very strangely felt very passionate about me taking your last name.
Oh.
Do you remember that?
See, I don't remember that. And I know we've talked about it since, and I'm very indifferent.
Oh,
but at the time, I can't recall.
Yeah, it was funny. We had a few chats about it, and you were like, I just want to have the same name. And I was like, okay, why don't you take my name? And you were like, oh, I couldn't do that.
A man would never.
But I mean, that was a long time ago, and everything's always a process. But I mean, you're so far from that place.
Well, you also never legally changed your name.
No, why would I change my name? I've already got a name.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I totally get that. Like now I totally, it seems strange that I would argue that back in the day. And our son has a hyphenated name.
He does.
So we've been very diplomatic about that. But yeah, and you never, like for the wedding, you ended up saying that you would take my name, and then we just never did it. We were just like, you just like kind of lured me in.
I don't know. It was an interesting one because I spoke to my dad about it, and my dad felt very strongly about me
keeping it.
Right. And I think perhaps because I'm an only child, my dad was just like, why would you change your name? Like you already have a name. And I was like, yeah. And
you got to keep the lineage.
And then you were like, I want you to have my name because then we have the same name. And I was like, what? Like it's like that experience of like being a woman. I was like, oh no, do I make my father happy? Do I make my husband happy? They both want me to have their name.
And in the end, you made everyone happy by acting like you would take my name and then actually just keeping your name to keep your dad happy.
Well, do you know what I did? I changed my last name. I hyphenated my last name on Facebook. And I think that
was enough.
And that got you off my back.
I needed. That's all I needed.
And I didn't legally change my name because I was never going to do that.
Right.
And I said, we'll just talk about it later. I think I just was like.
Look, that was probably the best way to handle it. Obviously, I wasn't passionate about it enough to follow it up after the fact.
No, because you don't believe in it. I think I actually think that it came from quite a sweet place of just like wanting to be that
owner.
Together. Not owner, but like you just wanted to have the same. But it's actually, when you think about it, it's really a lot to ask somebody to take your name. Like it's really a lot. Well, like if you think about giving up your name to take, another person's name. Like you wouldn't do that, but women do it all the time.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is a great point.
And then the argument can be, oh, well, I wouldn't do that because I'm already established in my career. People know me by that name.
Yes.
But what about a woman? You know, what about a woman in her career?
Well, lots of women these days kind of don't for that very reason.
Yeah.
You know, which is great. You know, and I'm totally open to it. I'm not a bad feminist.
So what happens next time when we go out for dinner? Should I just sit there? Are you gonna,
I will order.
You will order?
I'm joking,
Do I get to choose?
No, it's also funny because I would say I'm the more nervous orderer out of the two of us.
That's why I like to just come in and take charge.
Well, exactly. But then I think in moments like that where I really want to see, I don't know why. I think maybe your argument about being in a room surrounded by older people is probably the best argument. Like I felt maybe like emasculated in front of like these older gentlemen who are like, as you said, used to ordering for their wives. And I didn't want them to see me getting ordered for. But also it wasn't like you ordered my meal as well. It was like you ordered, you know, just the appetizers. But I think it was the assertiveness with which you did it that I was like, I felt kind of like, I don't know, diminished.
You felt like you didn't jump in fast enough. It's like the pizzas in the previous episode when I was like, right. Liam, we're paying for the pizzas. Right. Don't let them pay.
My hesitancy.
And you're like faffing about, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you know, now it gets organized. Which is really funny because you are such an assertive person.
Right.
And you get things done with such efficiency and like
this is my Achilles heel.
But like
Food
it's just in that moment. I think, yeah, I'm just not quite sure what that's about. I think it is the collective consciousness. I think you were just aware of your surroundings.
But thinking back to that moment, like if we were to go out for dinner tonight, I would probably, I don't know. Maybe I would feel totally different in a different environment, in a different room.
Yeah, it's like somewhere where that's a little more fancy or something. You felt like, I really need to step up and be a man. Like I need to do this. And like you make sure like you get up and pay the bill, the check.
Right.
And it's like our shared money anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. Like it's not like you're like buying me dinner. It's like lunch. It's like we're buying lunch.
I do find it funny because often when we're at restaurants, people will say like, "Are you going to split? Are you going to split the check?" Like when we go out for dinner.
I always find that so weird.
And I'm like, do you think that we're on a date? Like, is because we're having too much fun at dinner? Like,
I think that's it.
I think that's it too.
I think because we flirt with each other.
Right.
We're like not giving long-term marriage vibes. We're giving date number 4.
Right. Okay. I love this.
Oh, I reckon that's it.
Yeah, I've never thought about this. These are great points. I'm glad we really, truly, dug to the depths of this particular corner of conversation.
It's really interesting. I'm going to be ticking over it.
It is very interesting. So all of that to say is I'm trying to shine a magnifying glass on my relationship to masculinity and ordering food.
The amazing thing is that this situation happens for us. It's immediately flagged. And I'm like, Leo, like, and you're like, why would you, I wanted to order. And I'm like, why is this an issue? And we immediately talk about it.
Yeah. Well, you have to.
But so many people wouldn't.
Yes. No, it is.
So many people are sitting there and if they're in a male-female relationship, she would just not say anything.
Well, I would not
and the man would order. No, the man would order. Yes, and she would just sit there and that's just normal.
Or you would order and then I just get used to that and then I wouldn't interrogate why that felt weird. And then I wouldn't feel comfortable to also say that it felt weird because I wouldn't want to be that person who was like bringing up my strange inner thoughts. So after our Berkeley Books delicious lunch, we hit the road and ended up in Sydney. And we ended up in one of our favorite spots because usually we used to go to Coogee because we lived in Randwick for 6 months or 6 or 7 months and we absolutely loved it there. And Coogee was kind of our spot. But recently we've been checking out Bondi a bit more.
We've been going to Bondi this year a bunch of times. And we've been staying at this hotel that a friend recommended to me.
Right.
And ever since we've stayed there, and I've stayed there by myself too, they keep on sending me like room deals.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm like in their emails. They're like,
we're best friends.
Get 20% off something or other. Get 30% off, whatever. So like, I think we've stayed in the same hotel every
Quite a few
single
times.
time
Yeah,
that
we're
we go.
basically working our way through all of the rooms at the hotel. Yeah, but we do love it because it's kind of like a little bit away from the beach, so we get to walk down. We get to walk down past all the shops, and we get to walk past one of our favorite shops, which is Vinnie's.
We love thrift shopping.
Now, we need to explain to any overseas listeners, we need to explain what Vinnie's is, because it's kind of like an Australian icon.
St. Vincent de Paul. It's a charity thrift.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like a thrift shop. You can go in there, buy used clothes. You can buy used other things. There's always like great deals. You can buy cute pants for $10 and, you know, it's like an awesome spot to go.
I feel like whenever I get compliments on my outfits, it's always because it's from a thrift shop.
Right.
And I saw recently on Instagram, I can't remember. Sorry, I feel like that's such a basic thing to say. I read on Instagram or I saw a meme. Anyway, I can't remember who sent it to me or if it was sent to me, but I definitely saw it on Instagram. Something about thrift shopping. And it was like, you know, the reason why we're so drawn to thrift shopping is because it like taps into our like hunter-gatherer instincts. Because there's something about like you have to find, like you're looking through the racks, like you have to like find the thing that you're looking for. It's not just laid out for you. Like I just don't get the same excitement from going to a shop that's like a mainstream, you know, in the shopping mall. Right. Where it's like, these are what you should wear, and it has like the mannequins out the front and everything's the same and everything's the latest season and everyone's wearing the same thing. Like, it's just not as exciting to me.
Well, there's a massive dopamine hit when you go into a thrift store.
Huge.
And you find something and it's just like such a lottery win.
Oh, it's so
you
fun.
know, because it's so hard to find something that looks great, but then the fact that it fits you as well, it's a beautiful feeling.
Oh, I love it. It is so much fun. In saying that, I didn't find anything that looked good on me. I tried on about 6 or 7 items of clothing, which feels like a lot for me. Don't normally try on that many.
And I do take great pleasure in being like your thrift shop buddy, because usually thrift stores, they don't have great male sections, I will say. Like, it's a lot smaller. Probably there's like 20% male clothes and then the rest is female clothes. And so often I'll kind of look through the racks super fast and then I'm like, oh, what do I do? And you're still looking through all the female clothes, and then I will go and then help you like find some fun stuff and then give you stuff to try on.
You're amazing. You have an amazing eye for me. I feel like you know exactly what I like.
Oh, it's very fun.
You help me push my edges a little bit. Like, you pick things that I'm like, I wouldn't choose that, but you're like, trust me. You're like,
it's
just
super slutty, and I just want to, I just want to see you try it on.
No, but you know my body as well. So
I do, yeah.
You know what looks good on me, like what I would feel comfortable in, I should say.
Right.
So you're just great at it. But anyway, for whatever reason, I chose all of these items. Nothing looked good. Then we're walking out and we walk past the like lingerie section. Now, I actually haven't bought any lingerie before from like a secondhand like that. You know, I feel like I'm sure there's nothing wrong with it. I just haven't. I just haven't done it before. But anyway, we're walking past the rack. You stop and you pull out this, what are they called? I think they're called teddies.
Yeah, it was like this lacy kind of white teddy that almost could have been like, had almost like bridal, like wedding lingerie vibes.
And you love that.
I'm a sucker for that.
You love like white bridal lingerie.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So anyway, we like pull it out. I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, this is actually really cute. And I was tempted. But then I was looking at the bust and I was like, oh, the cups are too small. I was like, it just wouldn't fit me. Like, I'm quite busty.
Yeah, it wouldn't fit your body shape.
It wouldn't fit my body shape. So I was like, oh, it's a shame. And I sort of like held it up to my body. Like, it was nice enough that I was like, oh, maybe I would buy this piece of lingerie and just wash it and whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this would actually look amazing on a particular love interest of yours.
Yes.
Who you're going to be seeing soon.
Yes.
She's so wonderful. And I was like, oh, that would actually look amazing on her. Like, that would fit her so well.
Yeah.
And you were just like grinning. And then it was that awkward thing where I was thinking, oh, maybe you should buy that for her.
Right.
But then I stopped in my tracks and I was like, how weird. Like, is that, I feel like that's too much.
Weird.
It's so bridal. It's like, oh, hey, I found this like bridal lingerie for you in like the secondhand shop. Like, I feel like that's like.
Well, I think it shows, you know, supportive partner vibes.
Well, it was very cute.
I think it also plays in, like, you would love that too. I feel like you would love that as like a metamour. Like it's a cute way to connect with the metamour.
Well, I feel like I would have felt more comfortable perhaps if I bought it for her.
Because I was like, wow, that would look amazing.
Yeah, I did that recently. Actually, we were in a Vinnie's in Canberra, and there was a top that we came across, and I said, "Oh, this top would look good on." I'm not going to say her name, but I think you were seeing her maybe a year and a half ago.
Yes, right.
She's a dear friend now, and we haven't seen her for a long time. But I was like, "Oh, that's like exactly her style."
Yeah, with
these like cool kind of longish sleeves, and I was like, "Oh, she'd look amazing in that." But then it was that moment where I was like, "Oh, don't. That would be weird to buy that for her."
Well, it's funny because we connected over, like we had such a fun time talking about so we didn't end up getting the lingerie.
We didn't.
But we loved talking about what would have happened. Like as soon as we saw it, we were like, oh, maybe like, would it be weird? Would it not be weird? Like this is kind of hot. Like this is fun to kind of engage in this discussion together. And that was about the lingerie. Mm-hmm. But I remember, talking about Berkeley Books, I remember once being at Berkeley Books and looking through the book section and thinking, I found this book that a partner of mine at the time would have loved. Mm-hmm. And I was like, would that be weird if I bought her a book?
Yes.
Right?
As in you asked me that?
Yes.
Yeah. I think I struggled with that in that moment. I think I was like, I think I was having a few that was what do we call them? Growth moments with my opening up.
But I feel like that, it was the reason I bring that up is because like the sexual nature of the lingerie was actually easier for you and I to kind of really connect over in terms of the metamour thing, as opposed to something like a book that is like very kind of intentional and kind of almost like uber romantic in a way, I guess, would you say?
Yeah, or like, intellectually like bonding.
Yeah.
Like forming that connection,
right.
It's like beyond the sexual. And of course, I mean, look, we've spoken about it a lot.
Yeah.
That, when you are opening up, or for me at least, I do find it more easy to engage with the sort of sexual aspects of things.
Right.
As far as my compersion. But then, when it's more like emotional, more in that sort of polyamorous space is still, very situational. Right. I feel, because you actually got a book for someone recently, or you lent a book. I lent
someone a book, yeah.
That was really interesting because that book is a beautiful book.
It is an amazing book.
And you were like, we were dropping in on her. I think she was at work, and you were like, oh, I'm actually just going to give her this book or something. And I was like, oh, okay. And you were like, yeah, remember you didn't want to read it. And I was like, that doesn't count, because I remember when you were trying to show it to me was when I was writing and we were in a cafe and you were sitting next to me reading this book, which is it's like a sex poetry book.
It was actually recommended to me by one of our podcast guests, Chloe Caldwell. She recommended this book and it is unbelievable. And I tell everyone about it. Mm-hmm. So I will lend anyone this book. I think it's incredible. It's called Couplets by Maggie Milner.
Yes.
Yeah, an amazing writer.
So we're sitting there in the cafe and I'm trying to write.
Yeah.
And then you're like going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Read this part. I'm going, okay, I'm writing. Like I'm in the zone. I'm like really focused on what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And I'm trying to be like, oh, yeah, amazing. And you were like, oh, you're not interested. And then you were like reading it again. And then another thing, you were like, I don't care what you're doing. And you do this thing. You're like, I don't care what you're writing. Read this now.
This is better than anything that could possibly be on earth.
Yeah, you're like, read this right now. But for me, I'm like in the headspace and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm like reading it and I'm like, okay, that's beautiful, like nice. And then, but I'm irritated then. So I'm not really taking it in.
And it's hard to read. It's tricky to read when you're getting forced to read it.
Yeah, like,
and when you're not in the headspace, because it's all written in rhyming couplets. So it's kind of hard you have to really be invested in the writing style.
I actually remember that being quite awkward, because then you were looking at me like, why aren't you enjoying this? Why aren't you like, and then I felt bad because I was like, oh no, I'm not being interested in this, in your interest. And like, of course, but it was a moment thing. But anyway, fast forward about 6 months, you're like, oh, I'm gonna give it to her today because you weren't interested in it anyway. So I was like, okay.
Well, that's actually, in my defense,
you set me up to fail.
In my defense, the book, I lent it to her because I knew that she'd love it. And that's why I lent it. It wasn't because that you weren't interested in it, so I wouldn't I didn't want you to read it.
So, but that was my one chance because you never shared it with me again.
Well, it did sit on the bookcase for quite a while, but
yeah, but I mean, we've got a lot of books to read.
Yeah, I know we've got a lot of books. It is great. I recommend it to
everyone. I forgot about it because I was focused on what I was writing.
I recommend it to you. I will get multiple copies so that we can have 1 million of these books floating around.
Okay, cool.
So thank you, Chloe Caldwell. If you are enjoying this episode of the Evolving Love podcast, we invite you to follow, comment, and subscribe. Sharing the podcast with friends, family, or lovers is the best way to support the Evolving Love podcast.
If you are interested in diving deeper and accessing my premium writing archive and other exclusive content, you can sign up at evolvingloveproject.substack.com.
So this getaway it continued on.
It did.
It did.
So the next morning,
And this is the morning of the podcast awards.
The podcast awards. So we went out for a lovely coffee and a breakfast, and I spent the whole morning writing, which is so fantastic. I think we might have also had a little sleep in as well until about 8:30.
Magical. So this was a kid-free holiday.
Yes.
Which it definitely changes the dynamic of our abilities to relax.
Yes. So we're out for breakfast. I'm writing. I wrote my Substack, Is Monogamy Boring?
Which is a great read. If you have not read Abby's Substack, it's very good.
Like, it's a pretty out there title. It's a bit of a...
No, I mean, it's great. And it was the perfect question to ask with what you actually had written. If you haven't read that article, check out Abby's Substack.
Thanks, babe. So then after that, I went back to the room and needed some downtime chill. I don't like being in the sun in the middle of the day. I find it a little bit overwhelming, but you love the sun. Like you will, and it was hot.
Oh, it was crazy hot. It was like, I don't know, 30 degrees or whatever that is in American, 85 degrees.
Yeah. I was also starting to get a bit PMS.
You were?
Feel it.
I could feel it.
Yeah, you could feel it. So you were like, I'm going to clear out. I'm going to go for a run.
I'm going to run
away. Run away from me.
I'm going to run as far as I can within a 2-hour time frame. So I ran from Bondi to Coogee, which is like this beautiful coastal walk. We'd done it recently with a friend who was touring from America, and we take all our friends who are from overseas because it's just absolutely picturesque. It kind of goes from beach to beach along the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and I'd never run it before, and I've been dabbling with a bit of running, and I thought, oh, this will be a nice little challenge in the heat. And so, I kind of I put on Strava, which is also a new obsession of mine, which is very fun. And also a way that I feel like people are using it to start dating each other. I feel like that is an interesting new dynamic with the app because I can see people liking and following other people that I follow and like leaving a comment being like, great run,
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I can see that. And then in a way, it would almost keep you accountable too if you knew you're like
super accountable.
Your little cutie, someone's like watching you. And also I feel like do monogamous people know about this? Because I feel like nobody would, if, go to check like the phone messages or like, can you do private DMs on Strava?
Oh, I don't know about that. No, I have no idea.
Ooh.
Yeah, but it could be maybe Strava is the new Ashley Madison.
It's the new Ashley Madison. Oh my god,
that's the way to find folk. But also, I do feel like really good runners are also on there flexing. Like a few of my friends who are like really like hardcore runners, they'll just be like posting their like insane runs, and I'm thinking this is wild. I'm
imagining you on that run, and like I know you're like, I ran there, but I can imagine you slowing down and checking out babes.
No. See, this maybe relates to what we're talking about at Berkeley Books. I feel like you almost do the opposite. Because when you're going on a run, and this is why I thought it would be interesting to talk about the run in this conversation, is because I feel like you were in the hotel room, and if we were in a monogamous relationship where I was never allowed to look at someone for fear of you being upset at me and jealous and all of these types of things, it would change my relationship to enjoying these types of activities.
As in you'd do them more often because you'd go and check out people behind my back? Oh, you'd feel guilty.
So I knew, and this is like it was a beautiful day, and this particular part of Sydney is like really lovely because of all the beaches, and, it's just so picturesque, and there are a lot of hotties.
Yeah.
Just doing laps,
Yeah.
basically.
Mhm.
It's like a very, I mean, our friend who was over from New York, she was like, this is so LA. You know, like it feels like everyone's in their, you know, sexy, like Lululemon, you know, yoga pants, you know, all the
I feel
guys.
like it's a particular look.
It is a particular
It's
look.
like cap, ponytail.
Right. And
you
I'm
know,
not
short
necessarily,
shorts.
I'm not necessarily that look.
Everyone's tanned up the wazoo.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, you know, I have absolutely no tan compared to everyone.
You get really tanned.
I do, but at the moment, it's like we're coming out of Canberra winter.
Yeah.
So it is, I've not seen the sun in a long time.
Yeah. You're a blank canvas at the moment.
Yeah, I'm definitely a blank canvas. But then everyone who's on this run obviously most people live in Sydney, and they are just like super tanned. All the guys are like absolutely jacked. So I don't know if I don't necessarily fit into the stereotype mold of a runner who is going from, you know, Bondi to Coogee, but I can still appreciate it. And I knew going on the run that it would just be just so many hotties. There just would be so many hotties. So I hit the run and I just had an amazing time. But as I'm like, you know, going on this run, I have this amazing sense of freedom because I feel like I can check out attractive people without feeling guilty for it.
You don't need to feel guilty.
I didn't, and it was beautiful. And I knew that you were, you know, you were riding or actually you were back in the hotel room, just kind of chilling out, having a sleep, having a relax. And that was exactly the opposite of what I wanted to do, because maybe it was the nervous energy from the podcast awards, or I just felt like I really wanted to kind of move my body and, you know, just be surrounded by hotties.
So that's what you did.
So that's what I did. And it was amazing.
So then after a while for me, I was like chilling in the room and then I started to feel guilty, you know, and it's like a really nice day outside.
And it was.
And
it was also the middle of the day and it is the
I'm
worst.
allergic to the middle of the day. I like mornings and I like late afternoons and evenings. Right. I don't exist between 12 and 4. So after about an hour of you being out on your run, I'm in the room and I'm starting to feel guilty.
Yeah.
Because we're away, we're in Sydney, it's a beautiful day. And I'm just in the hotel room. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to just head out and I'm going to leave my phone. I'm going to have some phone-free time, go for a little walk. I took my money and whatever, but I was like, I'm just going to.
You're prepared.
I'm prepared.
Yep.
I had my book. Like I'm going to go and read my book, go to a cafe, go for a walk. And then I bumped into this darling man who I would say is like, he's a lovely friend and lover. We've had some amazing times. I wish that it would be so nice to see more of him.
Totally.
But I bumped into him on the street.
Just randomly.
Now, I felt a bit self-conscious because I was not like looking cute.
You were looking cute.
I was premenstrual.
You were very premenstrual.
And I also felt bad because he lives in Bondi and I hadn't told him that we were in Bondi.
And we've actually bumped into him before in Bondi. Yeah. Just by random.
Just random, because I think we've been up for a few different things. And, you know, he was lovely. Like, he was like, oh, you're around. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't reach out. But anyway, it was actually so nice to bump into him. And I was like apologizing for not reaching out. And then, you know, I was telling him that we're in Sydney like for the awards. And he was just this like bubbly, like he was just so joyful. And he was like, he works from home. So he'd been down at the beach and then he was like walking back up to his house. And I was like, oh, can I like walk with you?
Yeah.
And he was like, of course. And we just had this really nice chat for like 10 or 15 minutes, just went for a walk and it was so nice.
Yeah. I love this dude.
Oh, he's so lovely. And then I was like, you know what? I feel like I was so cranky and like spiraling.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I just felt like really picked up.
Yeah.
I was like, it's just a nice.
Fancy that. Bumping into your English lover in Bondi would have that effect.
Yeah. Well, it was just really nice. And it was just a walk. Like it was just like in that friend zone. You know, just lovely. You know, gave him a big hug. Like once we got to the house, finished off what we were saying, gave him a big hug. And then just went off back to the hotel room to message you to be like, oh my gosh, I just bumped into, you know, him.
Yeah.
And it was just really lovely.
Yeah.
And it also didn't feel guilty.
You did not feel guilty.
Because I don't need to ask your permission to be like, oh, can I walk you back to your place? Because I feel like it looks bad. Like if you're monogamous, it looks bad on paper. It's like, oh, I bumped into this.
My ex.
Gorgeous. Well, he's not an ex.
No, but if you, in a monogamous context, in a monogamous context, if you go, I bumped into my ex, I didn't have my phone on me, and then I walked him back to his place for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, think about how that looks.
That's exactly what it would be like. It would be like the
That's
ex.
exactly what it is.
But there's no breakup in this situation.
For us, because we're non-monogamous and life is beautiful.
I know. It's just so interesting. I felt grateful. I felt also grateful for the freedom because I was like, oh, I don't have to ask Liam. Like, I don't need to tell you and this is the thing where it's like, do you guys tell each other everything? Like, do you have to ask each other permission for everything? It's like, no. Like, I know that you would have been like, yeah, go for a walk. Like, you probably would have loved it if we did have a date, but we weren't going to have a date.
Yeah.
I remember you were like, did you make out? And I was like, no.
And I was so surprised. I was like, God, that seems like fate that you'd like bump into each other in this like amazing way. But I think also you are not in the headspace.
No.
Of that kind of like, I think there's times where, you might be in the headspace.
And I think this comes down to like people thinking like, oh, non-monogamous people like always down or it's always about sex or it's always this or something. And it's like, no, like you have to be, it's like when the moment is right, when things are aligned, when it's like organized. I mean, not that I couldn't be spontaneous, but
yeah,
it just wasn't the moment for it. But it was the moment for a really nice chat with, I would absolutely consider him a friend, a sexy friend.
Sexy friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's great that you didn't feel guilty about it. And, I was so stoked when I read the message when you did eventually get back and you did get your phone because I ran one way all the way to Coogee, but I didn't have it in me to run the whole way back because it would have been like, I don't know, 13, 14 Ks.
So you're saying you'll run away from me, but you'll like drag your feet like back to me when I'm
just
premenstrual?
very, very slowly. But I was really excited to know that you'd bumped into each other.
Yeah. And you would have known that, by the tone of my message that I'm like on an upswing.
Yes. Yeah, you were very excited by the chance encounter.
Yeah, you actually messaged him, I think.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this is awesome. Yeah. And then, but we had no time because at that point it was like we were looking at the clock because we're like, now we got to get ready. We got to get suited up. You've got to get into your, hot outfit that you wore. And so I didn't have time to be like, hey, let's quickly grab a beer because it was the podcast awards.
Yes. Okay. So we're at the podcast awards.
Okay. So
very
here we
exciting.
Are. It's exciting.
We're up there. We're in the schmoozing part.
Schmoozing.
Yeah. Yes. Schmoozing. Yeah. Anyway, we're up there. We're chatting. It was nice. We chatted to some people who we knew.
Yep.
Which was really nice. A producer of another podcast that we've been on.
Yep.
We met another producer of a podcast that we are going on soon. We'll be going up to Sydney for that. And then we met some lovely people. We met some other independent podcasters.
Yeah.
Who have a really beautiful podcast
called All Touched Out. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is all about being a neurodivergent parent and having neurodivergent children. And I think he interviews a bunch of people and they were just lovely. And they had that
absolutely
excited
beautiful.
From the heart, it's their project, his project, his podcast, but they're a team.
He was one of the few independent podcasters and it was actually just him. It's so he came with his wife and they've got 3 kids and they hit the road. It was like 8.5 hours for them to get to the awards because they're from rural Victoria.
Yeah.
And it was just like a big adventure, but you could tell how excited he was in a similar way to how excited we were because, it's very different being part of a one-person team like he is because he does all the editing and all that kind of stuff himself. And us, we're a 2-person team where we were in the room with a lot of teams that were like 10 people strong. Like it was like, the ABC crew. I don't know how many ABC people were there, but probably quite a lot. Like 30 or something. And then, or the SBS crew and the Nova crew. And like, there's lots of different kind of sizes of podcast teams working on different podcasts.
Yeah, so this was really interesting. Like when we sat down and I was like watching, because there are so many different categories. And when the people were coming up to get their awards, and the groups of people, because, the size of the teams, because it's like, for bigger podcasters or, podcasts with, high, good production podcasts will have like audio engineer, like there's the video person, there's the person who does like booking of the guests and researching of like what's going to be discussed on the podcast to then present to the hosts who are booked to be like the hosts or presenters of the podcast, you know, and then there'll be like, social media people and design for all of the tiles that have to go out on social media and all of that. And I was just sitting there and honestly, it just made me feel so proud of you and all that you do for us because, you know, you are the editor, you are of everything. You know, you book most of our guests, like you're always reaching out to people. I reach out to people as well, but I feel like you do the majority of that. And you are like up really late editing and just the video stuff, like it's so involved. It's such an involved thing. And it is a funny thing to just, it sort of makes me think of like when I chat with different people as well and they're like, oh, I'm thinking of like starting a podcast, you know, in the sense that it's like, oh, like maybe it's just like doing a voice memo, but it's like not really.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a little bit more involved than that.
It's a little bit more involved than that, very much so. So I just felt super proud. And it did feel really like we didn't win our section. Yumi Steins with Ladies We Need to Talk won.
An amazing podcast, which we love.
So amazing. And like Yumi Steins, you know, she's like an Australian icon. She hosted like Channel V. She was like the main person on The Circle for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was actually reading up about her the other day and I didn't realize, but her partner, who's the father of her kids, was like the lead in that band Regurgitator. Do you remember like Polyester Girl?
Although I think that they're not together anymore.
They're not together anymore. But like I loved that music. Like she was sort of that, like I remember her of that era, like when I was younger, like when I was like a kid or like a young teenager.
Band. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. And she and that podcast ended up winning the Podcast of the Year award as well, which is awesome.
He won the big one.
So good on them.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, and we love the podcast. So it was really, and thank you for your kind words. It is very nice, and it did feel really lovely to be in a room full of people who appreciate how much work goes into a podcast.
Yes. It was interesting, the environment of the podcasts, because I felt like there was this sort of almost like a hierarchy or something. Like there's something about of the awards.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's this sort of like in an environment like that, there's like, you know, obviously it's a competition. So it's like people are sort of sussing each other out, like looking around the room, like there's lots of like networking going on.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting because it does sort of run against sort of my beliefs with like non-monogamy as well, and like what what the values and ethics of our podcast is about, which is, you know, we are all individuals, so like you can't really compare. But so then all of a sudden being in that environment, maybe coming back to the collective consciousness from the lunch. But when we were sitting in the room, I hadn't cared about winning or not. I hadn't thought about it. Honestly, I was just stoked to be there. It was a fun weekend away. We were having a great time. I had a feeling that Yumi would win. Her podcast is brilliant. She has phenomenal guests and, you know, it's a huge podcast, been around for 7 years. Esther Perel, all the big ones. Like, honestly, it was an honor to like have our podcast on the thing next to her podcast. So I was stoked, very grateful. Yet when we were in the room, perhaps it was the collective consciousness, sitting there in the seat and looking at like the big screens and the presenters and people coming up and winning their awards. I all of a sudden really wanted to win. I was like, that would actually be really nice.
Yeah.
Because I wanted you to win for all of the work that you do.
Yeah.
But also I wanted us to, like, it came over me. I was like, oh, I do actually feel a bit competitive because I'm in this competitive environment. So it's like, oh, you know, we're just humans who are like adapting to our social environment and the people around us and what's going on. But you could feel that with people. And you could feel it with other podcasters in the room too.
Yeah, there were some big podcasters in the room.
There were some really big podcasters in the room. 2 women in particular were sitting a little bit in front of us, and like when their section, when they didn't win their part, you could like see, like I looked at them and you could see they're like smiling and clapping, but you could see their like obvious disappointment.
There were whispers to each other.
Yeah.
And it's in the same way that, when we didn't win our category, and up until that point during the awards, we were it was hard to think about anything else. Like, I know other people were winning awards, but we were just like, shit, when's our award, like when's our category going to be?
Oh, the waiting was torment.
The waiting was torment. And the actual ceremony went pretty quickly because the only people who gave speeches were the podcast of the year, the big award.
Yes.
They were allowed to give a speech, but everyone else kind of just like got the award, got a photo, and then kind of sat back down. But as soon as it started, our category, it was definitely, I felt it as well. I was like, oh God, this would be really cool if we won it. But it's also funny, like reflecting back on like why it would be cool. It's like, would it be cool so I could tell my mum that we won?
Yeah.
Like
I would like to tell my parents that we won an award. Like that would actually be fun.
Yeah, and it does feel like the fact that a non-monogamy podcast is in the Australian Podcast Awards, like that's pretty wild.
It is wild.
It's wild that, non-monogamy is at the point now where people find it interesting enough that, there's so many amazing podcasts around the world. The whole kind of conversation is getting lifted, but often I feel like in Australia it takes a little bit longer to kind of get to that point of it really being out in the open. The fact that we talk about, non-monogamy and different alternative relationship styles, and it's being kind of talked about at the podcast awards is wild.
I know, it is wild. It is really wild. And it was interesting chatting with a few people afterwards and, meeting some new people, and they're like, oh, so like, you're in the sex and relationships. So like, what is it about? Like, maybe they're just thinking it's like general, and I was like, oh, it's about like non-monogamy and polyamory, and just, you can still feel that like, oh, and people being like, oh, like one woman was like, oh, so, are you guys polyamorous? Like, she was quite awkward and
it kind of really took her off guard. And she was a podcast producer.
She was a podcast producer of a sex and relationships podcast.
Yes, yeah. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe we still have a little bit further to go with, normalizing, people's reactions. But yeah, it was an amazing night, and we were very thankful to be included in that. And we did want to mention it today because obviously, you posted about it on your Instagram and, some cute photos.
Yeah.
And it was the reason why we got to go to Sydney and have all these fun little moments.
So many fun moments.
So as we kind of look to 2025, it's crazy that the year has almost wrapped. And we're starting to plan out, different ways, different guests for next year, different directions we might be taking the podcast, and some fun new little things that we're interested in trying. I feel like the being nominated for the podcast award, as much as it would be easy to say, oh, these types of things don't matter, it really does give us a little bit, certainly for me, it gives me like fuel in the tank to know that, people appreciate and people are listening and keep on having these conversations moving forward. So yeah, 2025, there's going to be lots of exciting things in store. Thanks for tuning in to the Evolving Love podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback and support fuels our passion, and together we're building a community of curiosity, kindness, and growth.
Subscribe, comment, and let's keep the conversation going.